Thank you for your patience and welcome to the webinar titled A Peek into a Must-Have Add-on Solution for Oracle Clinical, presented by Michelle Engler from BioPharm Systems. I'm Eugene Safanoff, the Marketing Manager at BioPharm, and I will be going over some housekeeping items before I turn it over to Michelle. During the presentation, all participants will be in listen-only mode. However, you may submit questions to the speaker at any time today by typing them in the chat feature located on the left side of your screen. Please note that other webinar participants will not see your questions or comments. Nonetheless, your questions will be addressed as time allows toward the end of the presentation. If you still have unanswered questions after the webinar or would like to request information from BioPharm, feel free to visit the company's website for contact information. As a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on BioPharm's website within 24 hours. We will also be emailing you a link to the recording. This concludes our housekeeping items. I would now like to turn the call over to Michelle Engler.
Hello, this is Michelle Engler. I am going to be sharing a presentation. Just a moment here. Okay. Eugene, please let me know if this presentation can be seen.
Yes, it looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, welcome. I am Michelle Engler. I'm a clinical systems developer here at BioPharm Systems. I've been with the company since 1999. I have worked in development for a multitude of products over the past 13 years, from Oracle Clinical Validation Suite in my early years at BioPharm to Simple Forms, Excel Account Manager, and Accel-Copy. I have experience with the full life cycle of clinical systems, including implementation, validation, and development. So this webinar is about Accel-Copy, and we're going to cover Excel. We're going to go through what Accel-Copy can do in terms of data migration efforts. We'll talk about who uses Accel-Copy. I'll go through some business cases, including demonstrations, and then talk about what's next for Accel-Copy in the upcoming year. So to start, usually when you're doing a data migration, there are a lot of questions. And when dealing with Accel-Copy, it's important to kind of look at it from a different perspective, because Accel-Copy provides an ability to migrate parts of your database between instances, and you can break up some studies from some databases and some from the other. And so some of the questions that get asked when we're first approaching a data migration using Accel-Copy is, well, how can I migrate my global library? Well, Accel-Copy allows you to migrate your global library on the basis of domains. This means that if there were certain domains you wanted to bring over and certain domains that perhaps weren't relevant, Accel-Copy can handle that because you can select specifically which domains to bring over. I get questions about the status of the studies all the time. If my study is frozen, does that mean that the Accel-Copy can bring it over? I mean, get questions about the audit trail coming over and things like that. Accel-Copy handles all of it, all of the different types of studies. As far as the tool is concerned, whatever the study looks like in the source is what it will look like in the target, regardless of its frozen status. And it also brings over the audit trail in terms of patient data responses. And so this is the next question here. What about just bringing over new or updated patient data? What if I migrated my study earlier and now I just want to have the update? Does it do the delta? And indeed it does. It can bring the newly added data to the study into the target. And again, I'd already touched on this, that the patient data audit trail is also included in the data migration. Accel-Copy has a flexible design, and this means that in the case that your particular needs are to bring over select parts of a study, or maybe you want to bring a snapshot and time of the study, Accel-Copy allows the ability to change what's brought over as needed. So that's more of a we have to look at it from a more detailed perspective to modify what's being brought over. But the design is such that it can be done using the metadata definitions. So those are the questions that are generally asked. And the other questions that we get are, who actually, is the Accel-Copy administrator? And so, here's some of the things that the administrator can do. If I was an administrator, I could copy a production study into a test environment for troubleshooting production issues. I could refresh a training study after performing the training. This means that I could extract a study and have a baseline of it, and then perform my training and then clear out all of the data that's being added as part of the training by just restoring that study back to a baseline status. I could also use the tool to archive studies out of my database in order to save space. And this is helpful when we have these databases that are being used for years and years and years, and they grow to an extent that become really difficult to manage. Well, we can use Accel-Copy to extract those studies and then remove them out of the production database so that they're not taking IT resources to manage and maintain. Another interesting aspect of Accel-Copy is that it has a standalone module, and what that means is if there were maybe a disconnected situation where there's a CRO that ran a study in Oracle Clinical, and then when that study was completed, or maybe even while the study is being run, we'd like to have a copy of that in my environment locally at my company. What you can do is give them the standalone module to do the extraction of the study, and then they just FTP the files from the extraction to me, and then I can use those files to import into my environment using Accel-Copy as standard with the standard install. It also allows the ability to compare objects between source and target environment, and this can be helpful, like if you're trying to synchronize reference code lists, if you're trying to synchronize regions, or you just want to see what the differences are in two different global library domains. These kinds of things can be compared using Accel-Copy. Oh, and again, I just mentioned that you can use it to synchronize your global metadata, regions, investigators, sites, things like that. And then, as far as configuration is concerned, let's say, you're adding a new environment and you just want those reference code lists to be synchronized to whatever the standard is at your company. You can use Accel-Copy to perform this synchronization and make sure that the new environment follows the same conventions as the old environment. So these are some of the things that an Accel-Copy administrator can do. Okay, so let's get into actually using the tool here. Let's say what we have is a business case, and we need to migrate a new global library domain and study into an test environment. And so the mission is to copy these different items from the source instances and simply, import them into the target. So let's take a look at how that's done. Now I know that you can't see these, so I'm going to change my sharing here just a second. I have to go back here and share my Firefox. There we go. Okay. Eugene, can you confirm you can see my Firefox?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, so here's Accel-Copy. I'm going to log in. It's a very simple interface. And the first thing I need to do is do an extract of my source data. So I'll go to Extract Source Data. I select my source environment and then the type. So right now we're going to do a global library. I'm going to say, let's just call it Global Library 1. I can put a notification email in there, and that's helpful when there's larger jobs. You don't have to keep monitoring the job. It'll actually email when it's done. You don't have to do it, though. So I'm going to add my domain here, a demo domain, and then just click Extract. Now it's giving me a notification. It's been submitted. I go to the job queue, And here I can say, wow, it's already done. Let's take a look at what happened. You can see this here. So what it's doing is it's telling me all of the different tables that are involved in the extract and how many records were extracted for each table. So it looks like everything went off okay. I'm also going to now extract my study. I could have done these together if I wanted to. I tend to like to do them separately, but you have the option to add them together. In this case, I'm going to select my study ABC, and I'll extract that as well. I need to switch to having those appear. Just a second, let me just share the okay. Okay. So this is to prove that there's nothing here in my target database. My target database being Life 2, and my source database is right here. Should be. I don't know why. Okay. Get this logged in here. Bear with me a second. Okay. So in Life 1, we have these questions in my demo domain. This is what was extracted, the questions and the question groups and all of that. In my target database, I have nothing. There's nothing there. So we've done our extracts of the global library and of the study, and now the job is to import them into the target. So I click over here and I click Import to Target, and I'm going to start with the domain, with the global library domain. So I select my source, I select my extract, select my target. I can do it in test-only mode if I like. In this case, we're not going to. And I simply click Import. And again, it does the same process where it submits a job in the background, and then that job is run on the server. And if I had put a notification email in there, I'd get notified when it was completed. Okay. So we can take a look at it while it's going, and you can see that it's going through, and it has a line for each table. And in some cases, everything will import. In some cases, there could be a conflict, and that could be okay. So it does check for those. So, let's say you were just trying to update the delta. It would just say, although some of these were in conflict, and then you could see specifically which ones they were. But otherwise, I'll just go through and tell you what it's imported, and then tell you when it's done. So it looks like the job completed. And now let's go back to our target instance here and see if there's all of our questions. Okay, so that's it for importing our global library domain. This is our target instance. And then similarly, we would do the same thing for getting the study to be imported into the target. So you'd come in here, you'd select your source, you select your study, your extract, and then you select your target, and you just click import, and it goes through the process of importing it. So you can see in this case, for example, and this is kind of to be expected, things like organization units are already in the target, programs. And so in those cases, we check that we have the same elements in the target. And if we do, we say there's a conflict, but it's okay that there's a conflict that can be expected. So it just goes through and it does the import of everything that we need. And then when we're done, we've imported the study into the target. So that's the first business case of how you would be migrating your global library domain and your study into the test environment. Okay, so business case 2. We have a CRO that has a completed OC study, and we want to import that study into our local database. And so what we have to do is we ask the CRO to run the Accel-Copy extract standalone for the study and the global library of interest. Then they provide the files to us of the extract, and we load that into our system on the application server, and then we can import that study and global library from the CRO into our production environment. So let's take a look at how that can be done. So I've already gone through the trouble of getting the study from another database that's not in my connected environment. And I'm just going to go through here to import to the target. I don't know why it's all of a sudden. Okay. So I come here and I say CRO. That's my CRO, and I have a CRO study. And then I select my target environment, and then again I can just click import. So it's a similar process as it was to be moving between connected environments to do it from a disconnected third party. And then again it's just going to the job queue and then checking that my study was imported. So we can see it's starting to do all the different pieces. So that's how you would do the CRO study. And then if you go to the next slide, let's say that you have the business case that you just want to do an extract of a study that it's frozen and is completed. You can do that using Accel-Copy as well. And again, it's a similar process. So I come here and I say extract source data. I could say, okay, now let's say we want to take this ABC study that was imported and now we just want to extract it and be done. I can come in here and give it a name, and then I can select that study. I could also, if I wanted to, add additional studies to the same job, and I could extract multiple studies at the same time. So you just go through this process and then you extract it. It saves the extracted files on the server, and then after that extract is done, I can go through and actually just delete the study from my source database, and then it's cleared out. So looks like I had a conflict between my CRO study. So sometimes you have to resolve it, like if you have a different primary key issue on the region. So if I had one region in one database and another in the other and they didn't match up, you can get an error and you have to resolve that before you can go through. And there's a way to do that using the tool just to deal with these kind of conflicts. So that's what went on with this one. But in the case of this ABC study, I'm just going to go ahead and do this extract. It'll pull everything out when it's complete. I can go through and do the delete. And again, it's a similar process. You would just go through here and you'd select your study to delete, and you'd go ahead and click delete items, and then it would get removed. Now I don't want to do that because it's still in process of the import, but I wanted to show you that that's the way that goes. Now the final thing I want to show is that on the server itself, how does this data get extracted and what format is it actually saved in? And so I'm going to show you that it's actually just files on the server. So you can see, where we had done this ABC extract in our database, it categorizes things by the database name. And then within them, you have Excel files for each of the different tables. So if we were to look into these Excel files, we would actually see the data that was extracted. So for example, let's take a look at clinical studies. And what you have here is every single column in the source database that was extracted is here and then referenced. And then this actual Excel file is read and then used to import. And on that import process, it again creates these files and then flags what happens with each of the files. So here we have our global library import. And if I were to look at, let's look at the questions. That would be interesting. Oh, I guess I have to close this. Sometimes. Let me try one over here. Okay. On the import, okay, I'll close this right now and go to something more interesting. Events. All right, so for example, here's a clinical planned events Excel file. And here you can see that it has the same data that was in the extract. And then if you scroll to the right, it tells you the status of each record, whether it was inserted or if there was an error, it will tell you there was an error and what the problem was. Or if there was a conflict, it will say there was a conflict. So when you're trying to troubleshoot, if there's some sort of a conflict between your source and target, you actually have it at your record level, record level, so you can go and follow up exactly what's going on. So that's it. I'd like to open it up to questions. I like to leave a lot of extra time so that I can get through all of the questions. So Eugene, if you would, could you let me know which questions have been posted?
Great. So like Michelle said, before we go on to the Q&A session, I just want to remind everyone that you can ask questions via the chat feature. And your name will not be mentioned. And we'll try to answer as many questions as time allows. So we're going to give it another minute or two to see if we have questions. We haven't had any during the webinar, so I imagine you guys are all keeping them inside, and you're going to ask them any minute. So, we'll start with the first question that just came up. Can you speak to CFR Part 11 validation, please?
Yes. So the product's been through the full validation. It has all of the documentation pieces. So we maintain a validated state of the code in-house. And it has your functional requirements, your traceability matrix, has your user guides, it has all the test cases, and then we have all the executed test cases and the results available for audit as necessary. So all of that it has gone through validation, and then we have all those materials for your review.
Next question is, can entered data such as responses be imported?
Yes. You can actually specifically do just your responses. So if I wanted to, there's an extract type here of patient data. And the interesting thing about this is that there's patient data and there's also discrepancies, and sometimes there's DCFs as well. And so this patient data piece includes more than just the patient data. Now it can be adjusted if necessary, but yes, we can do just the patient data for a study. We can refresh it or just import the delta of the patient data for the study. But yes, it does the patient data only if desired.
Great. Next question is, does the audit information also get copied?
Yes. In terms of patient data, all of the audit information does come over. Now, we have it set up to not include the journal tables on the metadata objects like the clinical studies and things like that, but those can just as easily be included if that's desired. So for sure, all of the things related to patient data and discrepancies and the history behind that, that's all included in the import.
Great, thank you. How are conflicting seed numbers for responses handled?
So right now, we have to have different seed numbers between the source and the target database. One of the enhancements that's planned for this year is to have Accel-Copy generate the IDs independently using the sequences in the target, so that there's no longer that requirement that there'll be different seed numbers between the source and the target.
Great. What are the hardware requirements for this product to be installed?
It usually is installed within the Oracle Clinical environment, and so it has the option of a standalone installation, but if you are to install this interface that we're looking at today, that includes installing an Apache web server, active state Perl, and it gets put onto the application server, generally the Oracle Clinical application server. Now it does not have to be that way. You could put it on any server that you had that you could have those that supporting software installed, the Apache and the active state Perl, and there's also the need for an Oracle client.
Great. So as of right now, those are the only questions that came across. If you have other questions, please feel free to answer. We definitely have some time on our hands, and I guess, I know Michelle has a few more slides that she can go through, but let me just ask this last question that just came through. How can tables be viewed that are bigger than the Excel format?
So the system is aware of the Excel format limitations, and so what it does is it extends them. So it'll do like 50,000 records in one Excel file, and it will go on to the next Excel file and just increment them with numbers. So it can handle data that exceeds the Excel limitations in terms of number of records. And similarly, it can handle Excel limitations of the cell size if some of these, like the layouts, for example, exceed the limit of the cell size in Excel, and so the system is aware of that and is able to integrate importing that into an ASCII text files, and it can process that as well. So we work around the Excel limitations, but one of the enhancements that is in the works for this year is to migrate this Excel file structure to something called SQLite 3, which is it's like a lightweight database solution that doesn't have those kinds of limitations. It makes it easier then to work with and manage the files as a whole.
Great. Next question is, would this webinar be available for viewing later? Yes, it will be. We'll be sending out the recording within 24 hours. Next question is, do the import-export versions of OC have to be exactly the same?
No, not necessarily. The things that it can import in between different versions. Where it gets a little complicated is if you're going from a higher version down to a lower version of the system, but it can still be managed. So when the database schema stays the same between versions, which it generally mostly does, there are there are sometimes there's a few columns that have been added, tables that have been added, things like that. So when you're going between, let's say, like 4 or 5 and then 4 or 6, and you have these, minor, these tables that were added, it doesn't matter. The system doesn't care because it will import, all of the data that's there from 4 or 5. Okay. So in the case that there's a bump or a difference, that can be addressed because the way that Accel-Copy works is it uses these metadata files. I'll show you. These metadata files for determining what's pulled out and how it's pulled out in terms of extraction and importing. So if we were to look at like the global library file, all of the extraction SQL, and this is hard to see because of all of the SQL that's being used to extract is actually accessible. So we could specifically list out columns in here or adjust the way that it extracts very easily by just modifying the metadata file that's utilized by the tool. So in other words, it could be used potentially to take data or studies from one version and put it into another.
Great. Next question is, we currently use Oracle SQL Clinical CTMS. Would this be added to the server? And how do we inquire about pricing?
So right now we don't have the study definitions for SQL Clinical, but it would be, the tool and the solution applies pretty much universally. You just have to, we have to identify what the definition or the extract type would contain and then add another one of these. So we have to look at that specifically and then determine what would be needed.
Great. And I guess I'll answer the pricing question, which is on the last slide, we're going to provide information for our sales reps, which would be Vicki Green in North America and Rudolph Coetzee in EMEA. So feel free to reach out to them directly. If you have questions, you could also email them or email info@biopharm.com. So Michelle, you can go to the next slides while we get some more questions.
Okay. And so what's next for Accel-Copy? One of the things that's being discussed as an enhancement is to provide the ability to copy a study as a template within the same database. This is really helpful when you have studies that are similar and you may be creating a new study and it's very similar to a study you already have. You could copy parts of the study you already have into sort of a template within the same database for then being added to or modified or renamed as needed. So that's one of the enhancements that's being discussed. And the other, this is the thing about the seed numbers. It currently is bringing over the primary keys from the source and putting them into the target just as is. And so by that, it requires that the environments have different seed numbers. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't take, you could take your production database and clone it and import it into a test database, and all those numbers will be the same, all the IDs will be the same. But then at that point, you have to update the seed number in your test. Now, I could still then, import, delta from data in the production into my test, or new studies from my production into my test, as long as the seed number is changed in the test so that any new objects added in test are not going to be in conflict. So there's lots of documentation about how that works, and it definitely is a little bit of a different thinking style in order to utilize the system between multiple databases. So the other thing is that there's these other products that we have, and this is just for your information that we also have a tool for managing clinical accounts and allowing clinical users to reset their own password and retrieve their own username, and then for a clinical system administrator to actually manage the accounts themselves as opposed to having to involve IT for clinical accounts every time. And then we also have Simple Forms, which is an electronic data capture solution that integrates with Oracle Clinical through the Data Capture API. So are there any more questions, Eugene?
Let's take a look. Yes, so we have two more questions.
Okay.
Is this used only for OC objects, or can it also be used for RDC objects?
It does work for RDC objects as well.
Perfect. Next question is, when moving data from sponsor to CRO, is user account information transferred?
It could be, but I mean, in terms of the Oracle accounts table, it doesn't include that generally, but the reference to the users that created the data is still in the data itself. So that part has to be worked out in terms of what you would want in your target database.
Okay. What about deletions? Are they captured in the audit trail?
No, these deletions would be analogous to the delete study information in Oracle Clinical. This is a hard delete. It takes the data out of the database. It's powerful functionality. Certainly the security around this functionality can be managed so that only certain people have access, and you can also manage which databases deletes are allowed on. But this is actually, for purposes of archiving, it's a hard delete. It removes the study from your database without the audit trail, being in the database itself.
Okay. Does it work if we are a hosted system with BioPharm?
Yes, absolutely. A hosted system with BioPharm is even it's even easier because we know about how to manage the seed numbers and what things what to do, and if we had like a test and a prod environment set up for a particular client, then we would automatically, whenever doing a cloning operation or refresh, would update that seed number so that Accel-Copy would work successfully. So it's even better when it's a hosted environment because then we're there to support even in a more effective way than if it's remote.
How will upgrades of the tool be implemented?
So what is happening right now is that there's a main code stream, and that code stream is validated at BioPharm and documented at BioPharm as validated code. And then there's requests or enhancements or things that come through for the application, and that's put into the main code stream. And then, whenever possible, we try to share the cost of any of those enhancements or things that we're doing to the tool. But then, it's sort of dealt with in terms of the contract with the salesperson. But generally, what happens is there's a contract for bug fixes and minor releases to be automatically provided, that sort of thing. So. Major releases, there's a risk assessment done. Like if there's a major release in Oracle Clinical, for example, there's a risk assessment that's done on that major release. And then based on the risk assessment, there may be some additional testing. If there's any sort of coding that needs to be done to address the new release, that's all handled as well. And then those risk assessments are released for the client's review. So there's a process that we're building in terms of release management. But that's generally the components that we're working with.
Great, thank you. Next question was, do you include a validation suite when the product is purchased? This
is something that's generally worked out through the sales of Vicky or Rudolph, but in my experience, that's often the case that it is provided.
Excellent. We'll give it another minute if there are any more questions. Otherwise, we'll close out a bit early. Can you confirm again, you can just copy the global library?
Yes, indeed you can. you have these different extract types that you can select. And based on that, you can choose to, copy study and global library, just your study setup, parts of your study. So in the case of the global library, you can select that, and then if there were multiple domains, you could add these as your items, these multiple domains. And that would just include your global library in terms of the extract and import.
Okay. Next question was, will the tool delete the study from the original database once it is copied to your archive database?
Not automatically. If you go in, so what happens is you do the extract, you do the import, and if you did want to remove that study from your source instance, and this is the one thing I hadn't shown, I can show it right now actually, you would just come into your delete items here, select your instance, select your type of deletion, and then you would select what study you wanted to delete. So I'm going to delete this ABC study. And it goes through and it actually does a hard delete. So that's all, it's done in a series of steps so that you have full control about how and when and that kind of thing. So, here again, it's going through and clearing out all the data for that study. It's a small study for purposes of doing the demo, but and tells you the row counts and that kind of thing.
Great, thank you. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions at the moment. So we'll go ahead. I don't know if you have any more slides, Michelle, or do you just want to show the contact slide for now?
Sure.
Okay. So since we don't have any more questions, that'll end our Q&A session. If you do have other questions, feel free to contact us, contact one of the people below, or shoot an email to info@biopharm.com. I'd like to remind everyone that today's webinar will be available on biopharm.com within 24 hours for you to review and share with your colleagues. That said, we want to thank you for your participation and hope that the information we provided you today was helpful. Stay tuned for more upcoming webinars on OCRDC, as well as some accelerators and other Oracle Health Sciences applications. We'll definitely have a few more lined up for the rest of the year. So once again, thank you for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you at future webinars. Thank you so much.